Howdy everyone, and welcome to the Shrek the Third review. Yes, finally it's about time. After like 5 months, I am now reviewing Shrek the Third, and I'm quite looking forward to this review because the majority of people who've seen Shrek the Third hate the film. They think it's a cinematic disaster and is so bad that it is an embarrassment to the Shrek franchise. But honestly, in my opinion, I don't even think it's all that bad. And also, like the previous two Shrek reviews, Buzz Lightning will be joining me and will be giving his own opinions. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. So the story for this film, honestly, on paper, I don't really think it's that bad. It's not bad at all. In fact, there's really no reason why this film can't be as good as 1 and 2. But, you know, it just wasn't executed well when it came to actually making the film. So basically the story is the king dies and basically Shrek's the next in line to become king, and Shrek, unsurprisingly, doesn't want to be king, so he goes out to find Arthur so he can be the king instead because he has royalty in him. And on top of that, Fiona's pregnant and it's obviously with Shrek's kids. And honestly, yeah, if I was working at DreamWorks and someone gave me that script, I'd go, yeah, that makes sense. That sounds like a good sequel to the second film. Works very well as that. In fact, if you watch Shrek 2, one of the questions you would have is, so he's royalty now, so wouldn't he become king at some point? And that question does get answered in this film, but obviously things aren't really executed that well. So yeah, I like the plot of this film. I like the idea of it, and yeah, it's a pretty good idea for a story. It's just the things that they put in this story, which I just don't really like very much, which is unfortunate because, I mean, if they could have just done something else with this exact same story and it would have been great, fabulous. I'm not saying I hate this film, I wouldn't even say I dislike this film, but I feel like it had so much potential. There was just a lot of things that they put in this story that made me really frustrated when watching the film. So yeah, it's really hard to talk about whether this is a good film or not because the story, the idea of the story is mint. But a lot of the other things in the film are not very mint, and it holds back the film quite a lot. Oh yeah, after boring you to death with all that, I was pretty much saying the plot of the film is actually a pretty great idea, but it just wasn't executed really that well. So anyway, let's ask Buzz Lightning his opinion since, you know, he is collabing with us today.
The story for Shrek the Third, it's alright, I guess. I mean, if they had at least comedy in it, right, then maybe it would work. But if they do have comedy in this movie, it just falls flat and is awkward as fuck. Well, we'll talk about the comedy later, but, like, you know, the story for Shrek the Third is boring without the comedy. I mean, it's just a quest, really, to find Artie McFly, because Artie McFly is apparently the heir to the throne. I mean, the second heir to the throne after Shrek, because Shrek don't want to be a king because he's an ogre, and that's not an ogre thing to do. So yeah, I mean, the story for Shrek the Third is alright. I mean, if it had like better comedy, better writing, then maybe it would work for a Shrek movie, but right now it don't work.
Right, so the characters in this film, honestly, the characters that were in the previous films, I don't really have many problems with. I think they're at least fine. Probably not as good as they were in the other two films, but fine. Shrek himself, I'd say, is like one of the few like funny things in the film. His humor doesn't always land, but I feel like when this film actually is funny, it mostly is from Shrek himself. So he's still quite fun to see. So yeah, the characters who were already, you know, established in the franchise, nothing really wrong with them, but Jesus fucking Christ, those new characters, absolutely disgusting.
It's for the poopies. Ew! Wait, babies poop? Everyone poops, Beauty.
Can I interest anyone in a snack or beverage?
No.
Sure you don't want to try my famous Rocco Gratin? It's organic.
Oh, thanks. I just ate a boulder on the way in.
So yeah, pretty much any character that wasn't in the previous two films is a pretty shit character. They never have anything interesting about them, and they're they're just cringy. That's like the only thing you can say about their characters. They're just cringy. Like, the wizard character was really over the top and not in a good way. It was more of a, trying to be really funny and quirky kind of way, but it just doesn't work at all because, I mean, eating little rocks isn't really that funny. And also, the princesses, I honestly didn't hate all of them. Snow White had that one pretty cool scene with the immigrant song, and we can mention that in the soundtrack part of this video. But yeah, overall, most characters were pretty shitty, minus the older ones. But a new character that I didn't completely hate was Arthur Pendragon. Honestly, yeah, I'm not going to act like he was a great character, because honestly, he wasn't. Most Shrek characters have this sort of fairy tale-ness to them, like fairy tale-ness, that's what I said, and then they have their own little Shrek spin on it, where they sort of parody it in a way. But this is like one of the only characters that don't really have that, so he's not exactly a great character, but man, I actually did quite love his chemistry with Shrek in this film, and honestly, it's what saves the film for me.
I know what it's like to not feel ready for something. Even ogres get scared. You know, once in a while.
He dumped me at that school the first chance he got, and I never heard from him again.
My dad wasn't really the fatherly type either.
Well, I doubt he was worse than mine.
Oh yeah? My father was an ogre. He tried to eat me. People used to think I was a monster. And for a long time, I believed them. But after a while, you learn to ignore the names that people call you, and you just trust who you are.
You know, you're okay, Shrek.
Yeah, so this scene is like the entire reason why I'm defending this film. If it wasn't for like this scene, then I'd probably call this a bad film. But man, this scene really saves the film. I mean, he has a great conversation with George Michael right here, because wow, that was very touching right there. Let me just tell you, you get to see Shrek's journey and how far he's come. Shrek back in the first film would have never said anything like this, well, at least not near the beginning of the film, because in the start of the film, he just accepted the fact that he was a big scary ogre. He just, proved everyone's point. Everyone who thought he was just a vicious creature and nothing more, he believed them. But now he's realised what a true, kind person he truly is. And now he's telling Arthur, just because people say you're something doesn't mean that's what you are. That's exactly the experience Shrek has gone through. He went from just thinking, everyone thinks I'm a hideous monster, so I'll just go with it, to then when he meets Fiona, he starts, believing that he is something more. Man, this is just great, very touching conversation he has right here with little blondie boy. God, best scene in the film, not gonna lie. And it's interesting that we find out what Shrek's childhood was like. I mean, he's never mentioned his, parents or what it was like growing up in any of the other films. So I actually kind of like this touch of, his dad wanted to eat him. I mean, it makes sense to me, ogre and all that. And, and that's just great, especially since in this film he's having kids and he wants to be a better person than his dad was, I love that. Oh yeah, this scene. Very nice. Alright, so I think I've talked about characters for so long now, so I'm just going to get on with this last thing and talk about the villain of the film. The villain is Prince Charming, the same Prince Charming from Shrek 2, who was a nice addition to that film, so you'd expect him to be a nice addition to this film. Well, honestly, no. The reason he worked in Shrek 2 was because he was only a side villain, but having the main villain of the third film have the same exact motives as one of the villains from the original film, it just feels repetitive. And I mean, what they should have really done was make it a whole revenge story where Prince Charming wants revenge on, Shrek and his mates, because he probably blames them for killing his mother. But honestly, the guy hardly even mentioned his mum. It was twice, and he was oh yes, I will finish this, mother. Ooh, I will become king. Like, we already saw the whole I want to be king thing with Lord Farquaad, and he did it great with the limited screen time that he had. Honestly, Lord Farquaad didn't have that much screen time. I think he was quite a standout in that film. So like, why do the entire thing again with Prince Charming? Make it a revenge thing. You could have done that easily, and then maybe have done the whole king thing as an afterthought. Yeah, Prince Charming in this film is pretty bland because it's just repeating the same motives that we had from Lord Farquaad, which was literally 2 movies ago in this franchise. So yeah, sadly, Prince Charming, not great in this film. Hey, I'll tell you what though, Prince Charming is an absolute prick, so when you see him actually die and get crushed, I'd say it's quite satisfying, so I'll give him that.
Oh, so the characters, I mean, Shrek is always, like, gonna be, like, one of the best characters, and I think he's the best part of this movie, I think, because, you know, he gets the most screen time, he's the most, like, relatable in this movie, so, yeah, I think Shrek, even though he's less funnier than he was in the past 2 movies, I feel like he's still a good character in this movie. Fiona didn't really do much. All I remember her doing was saying that she's pregnant and being in a girl gang, which she didn't even do anything in that, really. I mean, her mother did more than her, which is kind of sad. King Arthur, I mean, he's an alright character. I mean, I didn't really like him, to be honest. It's a bit boring and a bit annoying. He's like, oh my god, so I'm the bird. Like, honestly, that's the most cliche shit I've ever seen. Donkey, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed with Donkey because, you know, he's normally the comedic relief and a pretty good comedic relief. Normally with these animated movies, especially ones made for kids, the comedic relief isn't even that funny, but in these movies, right, Donkey is always funny, but in this movie, he's shit. I mean, he's probably funnier in those, like, Halloween and Christmas specials. Like, honestly. Puss in Boots, I mean, he didn't really do much. He's a pretty fine character anyway, because, like, he doesn't like Puss in Boots. I mean, in shit movies, he's still good. So, yeah, that tells you a lot about Puss in Boots. The villain, Prince Charming, I mean, it's a massive step down from Fairy Godmother, and I feel like he's a pretty boring villain. I mean, he's kind of, you know, weird. He's just like, oh my god, I should have been king, and then he convinces the villains in quotation marks, because they're not really villains. Like in Shrek 2, they weren't really villains. Like, that was the funny joke in Shrek 2, how there's these villains in a bar, and then the fucking fairy godmother's the villain of that movie. That's the joke. And then they ruin it with this movie by making them terrorize far, far away, which is sad. And, you know, I mean, it kind of makes sense because the twins, you know, what are they called? Ugly stepmothers, ugly stepsisters, you switch places. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense because it's on new management, but, like, still, it's kind of sad. And they didn't really do stuff funny in this movie, so, yeah, big no-no. So, yeah, Prince Charming, I don't like him. He's a pretty boring villain. I mean, his only motive is really be king and kill Shrek. That's his only motives in this movie, which is, I mean, a bit sad. I mean, if they got comedy right in this movie, I mean, he could have been a good villain, but he wasn't, and that makes it sad.
Alright, so consistency in the franchise. Honestly, let me tell you, the only reason why this category even exists is because a lot of animated films aren't consistent when it comes to making bloody sequels. They're always changing the animation style or something, or they pull a stunt like Pixar when it came to Cars 2. Anyway, consistency in the franchise. It's consistency in one way, as in the story carries on over after Shrek 2 very well. Like, you watch Shrek 2, you go to Shrek 3, and it feels right. It feels like this is a continuation from that film. Shrek is accepted by the royal family. Now he's got to deal with being the next heir to the throne. Seems about right to me. But when it comes to the quality of the films, it's not very consistent. Shrek 1 and Shrek 2 are both fantastic films. Just those 2 Shrek films are 2 of my favourite films ever. But Shrek 3 is like not even in like top 50 favorite films. Like the quality of the film drops quite a bit because like we went from 2 amazing films to 1 okay film really. And then there's Shrek 4, which I'll talk about when I actually end up reviewing that film. So yeah, it's consistent in one way, but when it comes to quality, it's not very consistent really.
Consistency in the franchise. I mean, it's kind of consistent in the way that, you know, it continues on the story from Shrek 2, but at the same time, I feel like the tone and the comedy are really inconsistent from, you know, Shrek 1 and Shrek 2, because, like, the comedy is just very awkward and only it's stuff that, like, a 2-year-old would laugh at, and the tone just feels a little bit off. Maybe that's just me, I don't know, but, you know, in my opinion, the tone and the comedy don't really work with the Shrek franchise.
Alright, so comedy in this film, man, I've got a lot to say. I'd be lying if I said I didn't chuckle at all when watching this film, because let me tell you, I did chuckle every now and then, but I'd be lying if I said it succeeded more than failed, because honestly, the comedy was usually more bad than good in this film. But I mean, I think we'll talk about the good comedy first. First of all, I think this joke is hella funny.
Well, somebody better be dying.
I'm dying.
And man, I also just gotta respect quite a lot of the humour in this film, even though there's quite a lot of it that's really shit. Because honestly, a lot of the jokes you get in this film, you would not get nowadays, trust me. Like, there is literally a rape joke in this film, and honestly, that's funny in a way, but not like, oh, that's really funny right there, kind of joke. It's more like a, oh, holy shit, I can't believe they put that in a kid's film kind of funny. Because when you see something in a kid's film that you wouldn't expect to see in a kid's film, you usually find that quite funny in itself, where you're just like, oh, Jesus Christ, nah, no way they put that in, that's mental. So the joke itself isn't funny, it's just where the joke's being put in that's funny, if that makes sense. Like, if the joke was in a film that was, like, R-rated, it wouldn't be funny. But the fact that it's in a kid's film makes it funny, because it's just, wow, they did that in a kid's film. That's crazy. So it's that kind of funny. So since they are doing adult humour in this film, which I still respect, even though it's not, like, amazingly funny, at least it's not really, like, gone full on Illumination level, because Illumination, they don't really do much adult humour. They do fart jokes, arse jokes, which I wouldn't class as adult humour, it's just full on childish. But Shrek the Third, even though a lot of the jokes are kind of childish, some of it is adulty, and I just gotta appreciate it. I mean, who would have known you'd see a rape joke in a DreamWorks film? Not me. Well, I've pretty much been quite friendly to the humour right now. I've only been saying fairly positive things. I've been quite nice, but let me tell you, the humour, majority of the time, really isn't that good. And like I said, it's from the new characters mainly. Honestly, Shrek himself isn't really that bad when it comes to the humour, or really any of the older characters. In fact, you know, they're not, I'm just saying they're not bad, the older characters, they're not hilarious, but they're not bad. I get a chuckle out of them sometimes in this film. Not too many times though, not enough times for me to say the comedy in this film is great. Like, the newer characters are just over the top and cringy. Like, you can tell they were really just trying way too hard with the comedy in this film, with the newer characters. I think what it was is that, you know, they were introducing new characters, and to try and get the audience to love these new characters because they're new, they tried making them as funny as possible, and it just fell flat. I mean, come on. Who thinks this is funny?
Everybody stay calm! We're all gonna die!
Alright, so the worst kind of comedy you can have in a film is when it's proper cringy, and when you hear the joke, you just think, that's awful. I never want to hear or see that again. But honestly, sometimes in this film, the humour isn't, like, cringy, but it's also not very funny. Like, sometimes it tries to do something, but it doesn't try so hard to the point where it's sad. They just sort of do a little joke and you just like, But it doesn't really bother you that much. You just sort of like, alright, fair enough. You attempted something, it didn't work that well. Oh well. Doesn't matter, does it? It's not cringy, it's just like not funny either. But it doesn't bother you when watching the film. So I'd say about 35% of the comedy in this film is genuinely funny. And I'd say some percentage of it is meh, and quite a big percentage of it is cringy. But I can't be arsed doing the mathematics at the moment, so let me just say, a lot of the film is cringy, some of the film can actually be quite funny, and a lot of the times it's also just meh.
Bro, the comedy in this movie, man, it's a massive step down from Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. Like, you watch these Shrek movies for the comedy, right? But this movie, like, most of the jokes are just, like, kids' jokes. Like, there's this one scene that I fucking hate. The one where they're getting changed and they're in the proper weird outfits that they can't even move in, and then the guy asks the other guy to scratch his butt. Yeah, I hate that scene. It's so awkward, man. I mean, I generally laughed throughout this whole movie once. I laughed once throughout this whole movie, and that's when the frog was on his deathbed, and that was the only joke that actually landed for me. So yeah, kinda sad indeed. Entertainment and pacing, bro. This movie's boring. I mean, comparing it to Shrek 2. Shrek 2, you watch the movie and it goes like a snap of a finger. It's so crazy because with Shrek 2, it's like, oh my god, we're at the final, epic moment. The best animated scene ever. The I need a hero scene. And with this movie, you're like, oh my god, we're finally at the climax of the movie. Like, honestly, this movie's just boring. And I feel like this is gonna be the part where mine and Olga's opinions, collide the most, because I know Olga likes this movie more than the majority of people. And I mean, I can't really fault him for that because I'm the guy that likes Amazing Spider-Man too. So, yeah.
You're pretty much correct there. Yeah, this is where our opinions are quite different, because honestly, although this film has many problems, I am willing to accept that this film has many flaws, and if anyone says the film is bad, I don't blame them for thinking that, but I can sit down, put this film on, and be entertained, and I won't be bored. And honestly, the pacing, I don't really have many problems with it. The runtime feels appropriate for the story that they're trying to tell here, I'd say. But yeah, sometimes when things come on in this film, some of the really cringy bits, it just holds back some entertainment, because if you're watching something so cringy where it's like uncomfortable to watch, that's not exactly the most entertaining thing out there, is it? So, yeah, but let me tell you something right now. Seeing a group of frogs sing Live and Let Die has got to be one of the best things that has ever been animated. I'm not joking. And honestly, I'd say I even get some entertainment out of that climax. I mean, it's no Shrek 2 climax, I'm being honest here. It is absolutely nothing compared to Shrek 2. In fact, it is kind of sad that they went from the Shrek 2 climax to this. But man, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have some enjoyment out of it. In fact, the Shrek character himself does actually give some pretty decent humour in this scene, because like, man, Shrek himself, even though comedy hardly even lands in this film, Shrek is the one that seems to carry all the good jokes in this film, which I mean makes sense since he is the title character. But yeah, I actually do find some some enjoyment out of this, and like I said before, partly that is because Prince Charming dies, and I wanted to see him die because he's just a little bit of a knob. So yeah, I'd say it was quite decent. So yeah, fairly entertaining film. Alrighty, so the drama in this film, and honestly it is one of my biggest issues with the film. Now, the whole Shrek has babies thing, I have absolutely nothing against the idea of this. In fact, I think it's a perfectly fine idea for a Shrek sequel, but how it was handled is not very great. I mean, they could have done some really interesting stuff with this storyline. Like, this could have been some really compelling drama with how Shrek doesn't feel ready to have children. And man, I would have loved to see him, struggle with, like, processing the fact that he's going to be a father. But instead, they gave us that shitty dream sequence, which is one of the worst scenes in the film. Actually, I'd say it is the worst scene in the film. And after that, they give us this.
Ah! Oh! Donkey! Donkey! Wake up!
Dada!
Man, what an awful job they did with this whole baby thing. The only real positive thing I can say about it is that it does sort of relate to the whole Arthur and Shrek thing. And like I said previously in this video, the whole Shrek and Arthur chemistry is like the best thing about this film. So I guess I'll give them that at least, but man, they messed up this baby storyline so much.
Bro, the drama in this movie coming from Buzz Lightning, who's well known for apparently being drama hungry. I think the drama between Archie and Shrek is very boring and cliche. Like, bro, he's like, oh my god, you weren't supposed to be king anyway, I was. And then Archie gets upset over it, and then Donkey and Puss in Boots is like, oh my god, he didn't mean to say those things, he was doing that to protect you. Like, that's so boring and cliche. And the main conflict, well, what's supposed to be the main conflict of this movie, what's his name, Prince Charming and Shrek, that's boring as well. Prince Charming just doesn't like Shrek because his mother died, and Thingy, he took away his kingdom from him. He's like, you took away my kingdom from me, when Shrek doesn't even want to be king, and Shrek didn't even kill his mother. So it's like, bro, why are you getting mad at Shrek? Why aren't you getting mad at, the frog king or whatever he's called? Like, honestly, bro, the drama in this movie is so boring. Like, honestly.
Alright, so the soundtrack for the film. Soundtrack is very important for the Shrek franchise because, man, they are known for having some great soundtracks. And honestly, none of them will ever top Shrek 2. But I'm not going to lie, Shrek the Third is a pretty good soundtrack. I'd say it's around the same quality as the original Shrek film. But, just not quite as good because, the original Shrek film had All Star. But still, I'd say this is actually a really good soundtrack. They had Immigrant Song. They had, like I showed before, frogs singing Live and Let Die. And what else was it they had? Fuck's sake, what have I forgotten now? And they also got that Joker and the Thief shit, which honestly, I couldn't care less about the lyrics, but like, damn, they know how to use instruments, let me tell you that. And they've also got that song called Do You Remember Rock and Roll, or whatever it's called, which I've only heard in Shrek the Third. I weren't familiar with the song before watching Shrek the Third. But man, I actually quite like the song now that I've listened to it, not gonna lie. So yeah, soundtrack, it's pretty good, not gonna lie.
Bro, if I'm being honest, I get more enjoyment listening to the soundtrack for this movie than actually watching the movie. But if I'm being 100% honest, I feel like the way that they incorporated the songs in this movie is really creative. Like, the frog singing Live and Let Die, I really like that scene. Like, that's honestly one of the best parts about this movie. And Snow White going, bro, that was a mint as well. Like, honestly, the ways that they incorporate the songs in these movies, bro, is amazing. Even in the worst movie, it's still good, which says a lot about the Shrek franchise. So, yeah. Like, honestly, if I'm gonna give Shrek the Third soundtrack a rating, I'll give it a 6.9 out of 10. Because, like, bro, the soundtrack is really good in this movie, so, yeah. But it's not as good as Shrek 1, or Shrek 2, or even Cars. Like, honestly, those are some good soundtracks right there. Alrighty, so my score for this movie is going to be a C, which is like a 4 out of 10. Because, like, this movie is just boring, not worth the watch. Like, it's not the worst thing I've seen in the world, but, like, honestly, it's just shit and boring. Like, that's all I really need to say.
Alright, Buzz, fair enough score from you, but to be honest, I wouldn't really say a C is equal to 4 out of 10. Like, a C is probably at least like 5.5 at least, and a C plus is like 6, and I don't know. But yeah, this film, honestly, I feel like they have a lot of great ideas in the film, had a lot of potential, but a lot of the things didn't quite stick the landing. Like, a lot of the humour just fell flat for me, and when it didn't fall flat, sometimes it was just sort of meh and not very memorable. But don't get me wrong, I do think that quite a few of the jokes in the film were actually pretty good, and they sometimes did get a chuckle out of me, which, I mean, I got to appreciate what we have. Something I would like to mention about the humour, it's very different. Like, it feels like the humour of this film doesn't go well together. Like, you have some humour that is like for 2-year-olds, and then you have humour about like Hooters and getting high. So it feels like, bruh, who is your target audience for this film? Because like an adult wouldn't like these childish jokes, but like a child wouldn't understand these jokes about getting high. So like, who are you trying to target here? And honestly, the characters, characters like Shrek honestly carried the film. I don't think they ruined his character in any way, unlike sequels like The Last Jedi, which definitely did ruin a character that we had loved in the other previous films, Luke Skywalker. And also Cars 2 makes Lightning McQueen look like a proper knob. This film honestly doesn't do that. Shrek still feels like Shrek, and honestly, when the comedy does land, it's usually from him. But yeah, I just sort of feel like this film has a lot of good ideas and a lot of potential, and when it tries to do something great, sometimes they do something to sort of ruin it. It's kind of like Bride of Chucky in a way. Like, Bride of Chucky has a lot of great things about it, but it also has a lot of things that hold the film back. That's really what I'd say to sum up my review on this film. Has a lot of great things about it, but like so much stuff in the film also holds it back. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this film a C+, which is probably like 6.5 for me out of 10. I don't hate it, I don't really dislike it, but I'd be lying if I said it was a really good film. It's just like alright, but man, I honestly expect better from a Shrek film. Goodbye.